Thank you so much, Tammy. Yes, I am well aware that today is not Palm Sunday. So today is Epiphany. If you don't know what that is, who knows what that is? Who can call it out? Epiphany. Day the wise men showed up, which is symbolic of, come on, taking the message to the Gentiles. So this happens 12 days after Christmas. This is Epiphany. But the reason I picked Palm Sunday to read the reading today is because we have been going through the Gospel of Mark. We started it at about the middle of the year last year. And the Gospel of Mark is really divided into 3 sections. There is this section when Jesus is ministering. I'm going to remind you of a whole bunch of stuff like Jesus is going back and forth between the Gentiles and the Jews, and he's talking to both, and he's healing. He's doing miracles like multiplying bread and things like that. And then there is this second section that starts where he starts to make his way to Jerusalem. In fact, scholars call it the way section of Mark. He is on his way. He is headed for Jerusalem, and he is picking up people along the way that are walking with him. We concluded that second section in November, right before the Christmas season. And then we're beginning the third section today, and that is when Jesus enters into Jerusalem. So this is the third section of Mark. This is one of the reasons that I don't really like to deal with the lectionary. The lectionary is like these verses that pastors preach on. It tells you what to preach on each Sunday. And one of the reasons that I prefer doing a book study is because we're not even 2/3 through the Gospel of Mark. And Jesus is entering into Jerusalem now. Whereas, usually we preach on the Palm Sunday, and then we have 1 week, and then he's resurrected, right? So what we forget is that an awful lot of stuff happens after he enters into Jerusalem. So anyway, that's explaining a little bit of why I chose the verses I did for today. This is a very odd scene. I don't know how many times you've read about it and thought about it. Jesus riding in on a colt. You might think of a child donkey. And what's going on before this? It almost reads like a detective novel. You're going to talk to a man. You're going to give him the secret code. He's going to show you the third donkey. It's going to have a red tag on it, right? I mean, as you read the Gospel of Mark, you get this thing. People say, "Why are you untying that colt?" And they say, "I'm going to tell you what Jesus told me." And they do the secret hand motion. Today, I think most of us read it, though, like Jesus was magic somehow, though, that he knew all this was going to happen. He knew everything was going to be. And then he just kind of put people into a trance so that when they said, "The Lord told me." And instead of saying, "That makes no sense to me, buddy," they said, "Oh, okay, that's fine. Do that then." All right? I think that's certainly how I used to think about it when I grew up. My guess is that many of you in here think of it the same way, that Jesus just somehow knew all this stuff. But I don't think that's the picture that we should be getting from this. I certainly don't think it's the picture that first century readers of this text would have got. I think they would have read it a lot like a detective novel, that Jesus had set things up in advance, that he had actually planned all of this out. He put a lot of thought into this because it's a big moment. He's going to be entering into Jerusalem. He wanted to make sure the animal was just right. It had never been ridden before. He's entering Jerusalem from the east. He enters on a certain day. These things are going to be important to us. All of them would have been understood to an ancient audience. Now, in the ancient world, under Roman rule, that's what they were under Roman rule. They didn't have local elections like you might think, like we do. The people didn't get elected their positions. They were appointed by Caesar to that position. And there was really only 2 things they needed to do. They needed to collect taxes, and they needed to make sure that there was not an uprising while they were doing it. They needed to maintain peace at any cost. Pontius Pilate, from all that we can tell from historical sources, was very good at this. Very good at subduing the masses and making sure no one rebelled, while also being able to take Roman taxes from them. He was kind of a governor of Judea, which holds Jerusalem inside of it. And something very big happened. Every year, Jerusalem was, of course, and still is a holy city to Jews. And every year, thousands of Jews would come from all over the Roman world to meet in Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. If you don't know what Passover is, it is that day that they commemorate a time when the Jews were under foreign rule by another superpower, and God acted on their behalf to liberate them. Now, if you are Pontius Pilate, this is not the kind of holiday that you like. All of your subjects rejoicing over a time when people like you were put away. Passover was a tense time. Every person of Jewish origin in the city knew that in one way or the other, they were going to be liberated. That's what they were celebrating. And so tensions were high. There were always outbreaks of would-be messiahs. And so Pilate was swift to put them down. Stopping them from even popping up is what he did. He showed his power. For the majority of the year, Pontius Pilate was stationed in Maritima, Caesarea Maritima. It was a coastal city. It was an administrative place of the Roman Empire. But every Passover, 5 days before the Passover feast, which, by the way, would be Palm Sunday, he would go to Jerusalem. He would enter from the west. He rode a horse that had never been ridden before. Some historians estimate the number of soldiers that he brought with him to be about 1,000, each of them with full military dress. He entered the city with chariots and horses as a show of strength, with banners and, of course, the Roman standard leading the way. I wonder if you can imagine, without having cell phones back then, without having things to take up your time to spectate over, what a spectacle this drew, what a crowd this drew. And it served the purpose of letting that crowd in Jerusalem know the might of Rome, and it served to discourage uprisings. So I wonder if you see what I'm saying. There's two processions that's happening that day. One from the west, one from the east. Both appear to have been planned out. Both appear to send a message. So I was thinking of how to best put this in words, but imagine if we had someone in town who rented out a pavilion in Lincoln Park on January 20th. At exactly 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, they went on stage and they shook hands with a transgendered person in front of dozens of people who were not here in the United States legally. I don't think there's a person in probably all of America who wouldn't realize that is a political demonstration. They're doing something very political at that time. Not only would it be challenging to the incoming president, but it would be happening at the exact same time that he was being sworn in, right? Everybody would know, okay, there's something happening here. And of course, it'd be divisive, right? People who were on the side of that protest would say, oh yeah, go, 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 we're so happy about this. People who were not would not be so happy with it. Just like that would-be person who sets up a political demonstration on January 20th, Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a colt with palm branches being waved instead of Roman banners was a demonstration. However, if someone did set up that political demonstration on any inauguration day of any new president, and they had on the stage with them things that incoming president was against, it would obviously be a demonstration against that incoming president. Jesus' demonstration was not against just Pilate, though, and it was not against just Rome. Listen to these verses from Zechariah. This is Zechariah 9:10. The battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from the rivers to the end of the earth. Jesus' demonstration, just like his death, is universal. It's for all people, everywhere, for all time. To Pilate and to Rome, Peace was brought by might. Might makes right, we might say. Power was worshiped. And if we're honest with ourselves, not much has changed in the 21st century, right? We still like power. We like the big hit. We like the knockout punch. We like stories of the person destroying their enemies. And I say his here, by the way, that's very intentional, because like in the first century, in the 21st century, we still have this idea of domination is a male trait. You may have heard of this popular study that happened only a few years ago where someone just looked at movie posters and realized that whenever a woman is on a movie poster, even if she is the main character, even if she's supposed to be the dominating force, she always has to have a smile on her face, because we don't like to see women frowning. But men, we like to see them with a stern face to show power and control. Many churches look for pastors who are fearless, who are uncompromising, who are, as we used to say when I was a kid, tough on sin. We want leaders, you've heard that too, huh? We want leaders who are tough, who take charge, who don't back down. We praise people who win at all costs. Even if winning hurts others, we just don't think about them. We celebrate power in many forms. We celebrate wealth and call it success. We celebrate ambition and call it drive. We celebrate domination and we call it leadership. This isn't just in the world of politics or business. It's also in our homes. How often do we celebrate children who are bold and assertive while telling those who are sensitive to toughen up? We like big people, big parties, big cars, big militaries. And this view affects how we see the world, how we see peace. Peace by submission instead of peace by a change of heart. Joy is brought by winning, not by working together to help others win. Hope is brought through worldly powers and worldly desires, hoping that our enemies will be smashed, instead of the hope that Jesus brings that is universal and has at its backbone forgiveness and grace. Love is seen as a privilege for those who are outside of the church to be privileged enough to enter into the church whenever they would like. Sometimes it's just a privilege that we love them from afar, right? The mentality of the world, the mentality of the strong is often love by making others conform instead of loving others for who they are. On Palm Sunday, which again I realize today is not, we often remember a time when Jesus triumphantly enters into Jerusalem, and we even reenact this. Sometimes the people who gathered around him, laying down palm branches and yelling, "Blessed be he who comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna in the highest." But what we often forget is that many of those people didn't understand Jesus' message, the message of the colt. Many thought Jesus was coming to show his strength, that his protest was against Pilate, was and a protest against Rome, that he was going to drive out this oppressive regime. We forget that once many of these protesters discovered the true meaning behind the colt, that their shouts turned from "Blessed be he" into shouts of "Crucify him." So it occurred to me as I was working on this sermon this week, this was a very good sermon to preach at the dawn of a new year. Last week I encouraged you to think about how God was working in you for this new year, how you are ambassadors of God's new thing. I think Palm Sunday challenges us to see the world as Jesus did. We might make our New Year's resolutions to seek more personal strength, but really we need to be striving to allow God to help us serve others and show his strength. We might be tempted to resolve to build more confidence in ourselves, when really what we need to be doing is seeking God to help us rely more on him and trust his guidance. Some of us resolve to save money or look for ways to gain wealth. when we need to be striving to allow God to help us be more generous with what we have in caring for those in need. We say things like, I'm going to take control of my own life. I'm a strong person. I can do it. When we really need to say, I am weak, and I surrender control, trusting God to take control of my life. We might seek to make our lives more peaceful by eliminating challenges. What we need to do is to rely on God to give us peace in the midst of life's challenges. This year we can choose to measure success not by how much we gain, but how much we give. We can choose to find strength not in controlling others, but in serving others. We can choose to seek peace not through force, but through compassion and understanding. So I guess to sum the message up, one thing I'd like you to know and understand more than anything else is that Jesus' procession, it was a demonstration. And much like other political demonstrations that you've seen in the news, it was very divisive. Just as there was in that day of Jerusalem long ago, there are always two processions entering into our city, one of power and might, and one of love and forgiveness. The challenge of Palm Sunday is that we are forced to choose which procession we will stand in. Let's pray.